Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.Buzz, and I'm really excited to welcome today to the Innova.Buzz podcast from Scotland, from Fife in Scotland, Alison Smith, who's a business consultant, a trainer, a speaker, an author, and also a business coach. Welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast, Alison, and I'm really stoked to have you here.
Great to be here.
Yeah, no, you help people get unstuck when they're struggling and don't know what to do, and that's a kind of a big overarching situation. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that part. You also host the Landscaping Your Life podcast. You have a book called Can't See the Wood for the Trees, Landscaping Your Life to Get Back on Track. And all of those, that whole idea, landscaping your life, is about using metaphor to help get unstuck. That's something that I'm really excited to dig into today. Before we do that, though, what's the impact you're making in the world today, Alison?
I think it's at an individual level. So even when I'm working with teams, the impact is at an individual level where I'm helping people connecting with their inner wisdom. If you follow all the tracks, people taking being more self-aware, taking personal responsibility, and listening to their own inner wisdom to make decisions and get back on track.
I like that term, inner wisdom. What do you understand by that?
There's lots of different words for it, but I think I would say you could some people might call it soul, but for me it's just that inner knowing. It's the part of you that isn't really that overly logical, and is running the show unconsciously behind logic. So it's the part that does know what to do. And therefore, for me, that's where metaphor for me helps, because it bypasses all of the resistance and barriers that logic puts up, because logic will defend its position. And there's a part of you that's going, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's about listening to that. The part of you that does. One of the other answers I could have given you about what do I think I help people do is bring humanity into business. But that's exactly that inner wisdom. It's putting the musts, oughts and shoulds of stereotypes of what we think we should do in business, and saying, if I turn up as me in all of my humanity, that's what the world needs.
Fascinating. And with that inner wisdom, I'm guessing that a lot of that, my experience is a lot of that is almost unconscious or so ingrained in our character that we take it for granted, so we don't necessarily tap into it, or we don't necessarily, we may tap into it and use it for ourselves, but we don't necessarily share it with others. How do you see that, and how do you help people tap into that inner wisdom and make the best use of it?
I think that's where the metaphor comes in, because for me, metaphor is taking that inner wisdom and putting it in front of us. So that's why I go out in nature, that I invite people to look at nature and say, how is what you're seeing in that landscape reflecting either how you're feeling, the current situation you're wanting insight on? So it is automatically taking that inner wisdom and putting it in front so people can see it. And I think that's where it makes it more tangible, because somebody goes, oh, well, I'm noticing, especially if you're in groups, people will notice such different parts of the landscape and then realize that part of the landscape is talking to them, or is a part of them that's talking to them about, oh, I need to turn that corner, or oh, I need to follow a path, or I need to not follow a path.
Yeah.
And it's, you know what, I've always wanted to do this, and why am I only now realizing that the inner wisdom has been nudging me to say, stop following the current path. So it is bringing out into conscious awareness what's happening, I think, well, I'd like to say, what's happening underneath.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was reflecting back on some of the metaphors that you list in your book, and also some of the others that brought to mind. And I thought, well, a lot of those metaphors come back from, it was sort of what's the corporate speak from my corporate days, and a lot of them had negative connotations. So we talked a lot about spinning wheels in the sand, or up the creek without a paddle, which I think features in the book. Going out on a limb, which perhaps was more positive sometimes. How do you use those metaphors, because they're stuck in a rut as well? How do you take those metaphors and kind of bring them into a positive light?
I think what I observed, you're quite right, that people use them negatively because they use a lot of metaphors or idioms to describe them being stuck. So what I realized was that metaphor has solutions hidden within it, but we're using it to say we're stuck. So when we use those words, we're saying, I can't see the wood for the trees. That's it. I'm stuck. Full stop. And what the process I use suggests is, but those very words contain a metaphor, and that metaphor does have solutions. So I would say, if you resonate with can't see the wood for the trees or up a creek without a paddle, put the situation to one side. So we don't want to start saying, how does what I'm just about to say relate to that situation too quickly? We need to stay with the metaphor for as long as possible. But then it's, okay, so if I can't see the wood for the trees, what would I do in a real wood? And quite often I've taken, suited business people out into a wood, and we've explored the wood. Or I've sat here in Scotland and I've had somebody in America wandering around a wood at their end and inviting them questions about, so what are you noticing about this wood? And I still get goosebumps now, even 20 years after first using it, because people still see things that I've never heard anybody say that they've noticed. Yeah. And that's just the power of metaphor, that somebody will say, a lot of people might say, I need to follow that path, or not follow that path, or, I need to turn round and go in completely the opposite direction. But then I had somebody recently say something about, it's all about the river, it's about the stream, I need to follow the stream. And that's much more difficult. And so therefore we had a conversation about the difficulty involved in following a stream through a wood versus following a path, and then understanding, so how does that then relate to their problem? Because that's the idea. We just come up with multiple different solutions for seeing the wood for the trees, and then look to relate them to the current situation, but only once we've got a lovely list. Because what it's told I had is, you said those words and believed there were no options. You've now got a lovely list of options. Now let's take those options back to the real life situation. But there was one time when there was, I don't know, six business people with me, and we were talking about not being able to see the wood for the trees, and obviously looked lost because there was a ranger walking past, and they came up to us and said, do you want a map? So of course then there was a conversation about how many people had maps to help them get out of the problem that they were working on.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I guess you talked about tapping into that inner wisdom and people noticing different things so different people going to the woods and noticing different things, and you're still surprised after so many years of using the technique what people will notice. And part of that, I suppose, is what is it that resonates with them that's kind of somehow their unconscious is noticing that, as opposed to all the other things they could be noticing, and there's probably some connection between that and the issues that are going on and bubbling in their brain.
Yeah, it's pattern
underneath.
Recognition. Yeah, pattern recognition. It's like, what pattern out there, and sorry, I'm looking out of my window because there's nature out of the window. So what pattern out there in nature can we map this problem or the solution onto, to say, oh yeah, I need a higher vantage point. Of course I haven't got to a higher vantage point. I can't see everything. Right, how can I get that vantage point in this problem that I'm trying to solve?
Love it. So how did you discover this technique? How did you was this something that you've evolved over time, or was it something you stumbled upon because you had an experience?
Both. In terms of the first time was I left university and went into procurement, so my profession is procurement. And in the mid-90s, we were trying to explain to managers in the business why they needed to be listening to what we were talking about in procurement, and why supplier management ought to be something that they paid more attention to. And when we talked about theory and about supplier management, came out with all these lovely models of supplier management, they just glazed over and went, yeah, we're doing it. As soon as we invited them to a workshop and said, we're going to design a garden, and then said, and asked them to think about, well, what do you need for a garden? And they said, oh, we need to mow the lawn, we need it weeding, we need to think about the design of where we put some plants. You know, some plants will or won't thrive in shade, etc., etc. And some plants need time in the greenhouse. Once they designed their garden, looking at us thinking, this is a procurement workshop, what we're doing. And then we said, but all of what you've just done, now put suppliers' names to all of those plants. That supplier is that tree where the roots are undermining the house. And no, that supplier needs time in the greenhouse. And we haven't really done any weeding at all. And if we think about it with our suppliers, it's as if we're just buying them, plonking them anywhere, and then wandering off, and then wondering why they've died, So what it did, so easily and fun, people remembered it. They suddenly realised that, we need to pay attention to what they're saying. We do need to look after our suppliers. And it gave them a different language to talk about suppliers. That isn't a useless supplier. It just needs a bit more time in the greenhouse. Or, that supplier is using too much of our time, and it's because they're a weed. So what do we need to do to get rid of them? So that was in the mid-90s. And I think then when I went to a neuro-linguistic programming course and we explored the power of metaphor, I sort of took that gardening as a metaphor for procurement into landscapes as a metaphor for life. And whilst on the NLP, obviously we looked at a broader range of metaphor, I continued with that using nature. And I think the more I realised that I do most of my poetry writing in nature, I get most of my innovation and ideas in nature. When I'm stuck, I go to nature. It isn't a surprise that I've then, I suppose, adopted the metaphor of using nature as the metaphor that we're going to use to facilitate change.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The impact that has, and one of the things that you mentioned earlier is you work more at an individual level, but you've talked a lot about teams, bringing teams together, taking teams out of the nature. So how do you kind of mix the two up, working at the individual level and in getting the transformation that happens to kind of get translated right through the team?
Yeah, I think what's happened is that I get asked in, and even in procurement training, I get asked in to do procurement training. So the procurement training is, here's the process, and yeah, absolutely, it's about facilitating change of behaviour in the team. But what I've discovered, and I suppose that comes from the NLP piece, the coaching I do, is that each individual's reason for not changing or resisting changing is different. So what I have to do at the beginning of any training is provide, a question, an exercise that enables people to tap into themselves, for them to understand, I'm looking at this situation in this way because this is how I think. this person is looking at it differently, and therefore this, because quite often I'm working with people who are wanting to facilitate change in stakeholders, and they then realize that they're different from the stakeholders. They individually are different from the stakeholders, and therefore then want to understand more about the different ways they are different from those stakeholders, and how might those stakeholders think differently, and what might motivate those stakeholders to listen. So I think it's just the fact that even when I'm talking to a group, every individual has got a different aha moment and a different way in. And that's the bit I enjoy. Because it's not about I'm going to just do the same thing every time. One colleague I do some training with says, you're not happy unless you've changed something. and that's right. But it is because in the moment somebody says something that in I suppose how I work triggers for me what we would normally do isn't going to work for this audience or that person. And in that moment I'm going, so what either have I tried before or new might work in this instance? And then it's, all right, we'll ask a different question, or we'll do it something slightly differently. Because that's what I'm tracking. I'm not tracking does the group get the process? I'm tracking has the group got the change in mindset needed to go and do everything different afterwards.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And when I started doing NLP training and went through all the levels of that, well, very early on, actually, I realized there was the missing piece from all my corporate training that I'd done, where groups were brought together and, okay, we're going to do this process, or we're going to make this change, or there's this new thing we're going to do, or we're going to merge this company in, and here's what happens, and so on. And it was all around, everybody got the same training, everybody was expected to follow the process, which is fine, but everybody was expected to sort of go down the one path in terms of, what motivated them to change, what was their role going to be in that change. And of course, each individual, as you pointed out, was different there and was motivated differently. So, that was a missing bit for me when I saw that. And I thought, well, that's be nice to go back now and actually be a consultant to some of those things where I was a participant and say, here's how you should have done it.
Yeah. The change management's hilarious, I think, because everybody's really judgmental of their stakeholders that they're wanting to change. Oh, they're resistant. They're not listening to me. And what I've learned is the first question that you ask actually on any session is, why do you resist change? And people will come up with a lovely list, and they're very empathetic and sympathetic or about those reasons. And then once they've got this list of why they resist change, and then you go, well, I go, so they're all the same reasons that your stakeholders are resisting change. They're not being awkward for awkward's sake. It's just that they don't understand the benefits, or they don't understand what you're asking, or you've not involved them, or all of those things, which then means that they can take responsibility for, okay, so if these are the reasons I resist change, what do I need to do in order to mitigate those and come up with a plan that helps my stakeholders come along with me? And that's, everybody looks at me and goes, but that's such a simple question. Yeah, but it gets people back into their own bodies to realize they're not different from the stakeholder. The stakeholder is them in any other situation. And therefore, there's much more empathy about, oh, yeah, I didn't really involve them, did I? Okay, I need to involve them. I need to ring them up and apologise or whatever. Yeah. Whereas at the start of the conversation, they're very much more judgmental of, I want to facilitate, this change to happen, and they're the reason it's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's kind of a little bit, one of the presuppositions of NLP is that we have control over our own response to whatever situation we're in, rather than being at cause rather than being at effect, so being affected. And I'm just sort of trying to attach this to the metaphor of the forest. So if I can't see the wood for the trees, I could cut down all the trees, and then maybe I can see the wood, but that wouldn't really be a good solution, particularly not in the real sense. So a better way would be to take more responsibility and say, well, can I climb a mountain so I can see down over the trees?
The other thing that the first question I ask if somebody can't see the wood for the trees, well, sorry, the second one. The first one is quite often about where do you want to be? Because quite often people don't even want to be in the trees. And it's, oh, I just want to get to the other side of the trees and I'm being distracted by the trees. So that's okay, great. So what are you being distracted by? How do we stop you being distracted by that? What do you want? Let's get on it. But the second question, and my head's now gone, well, this is the problem sometimes. I'll go off at one tangent and then it's like, oh, I need to rein myself back. What was the second question? What inspired me that? What did you say that inspired me to go, oh, yes, and then came off that? Oh, no. The second question. Oh, golly, my head's gone. Yeah, I'll have to come back to it, unless you can remember the question. Yeah, that's my excitement. I talked about
chopping down the trees as opposed to climbing the mountain.
You're a gem. You're a gem. Thank you. Absolutely. The second question is, in what way are you adding more trees to the wood?
Yeah.
That's right. Oh, yeah, we are. Oh, yeah, I am. I'm there busy trying to put more trees in and then blaming everybody else for there being too many trees. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Yes, so there's lots of metaphors to remember. I know I find the concept of kind of removing oneself from the day-to-day activities and going out, and for me it's often into nature as well, but for me it's activities that I really enjoy doing kind of as a hobby, so bike riding or photography, and those are the times when I can be just so focused on that one activity that everything else disappears. I mean, time almost stands still. But then I come back to a problem, or often what happens is in the middle of that there'll be some spark, and it's almost like somebody's whacked me over the head, and that's what I've got to do with that. And so I imagine there's experiences like that happen when you do these activities.
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's not always the activities that I'm getting people to do. And I think perhaps that facilitates the change. You're right. So it could just be the fact that they're out, they're walking. You know, there's quite a bit of research out that said, you know, if you're trying to solve a problem, walk side by side with somebody and talk about it, because walk. And that the movement does stuff within your body, and, you know, being out in nature does other stuff. So, yeah, I don't suggest that only the questions I ask facilitate the change. There'll be all sorts of things coming together that facilitate that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but the idea, I like the idea of the walking and talking, and I think that's another way that, if I understand the research correctly, that's another way to kind of bypass that logical filter.
Yeah. The other thing about that is that I'd suggest whenever you see them, there's those A5 whiteboards with a pen that's attached to the whiteboards that you see in those sort of stationery shops. Buy them, because they're so handy when you're going for a walking meeting, unless you've got your phone and you use notes on your phone. But they're quite handy. So if I quite often send people out with those, because they've only got one thing to hold in their hand. It's already got the pen attached to it. And the whiteboard aspect of it makes it easier to write, because you've not got pieces of paper that, you know, and pens and trying to lean on it. So, yeah, a whiteboard is in my kit bag for most of the training if we do things outside. Just so that if people are walking along and, I need to remember to do that, write it on the whiteboard.
Excellent. Well, this is fascinating. We could go on talking metaphors for ages, and we've only really done the wood for the trees one. We could explore another one or another few, but I'm just aware of the time. So I think it's a good point now to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round. And it's the same 5 questions I ask every guest. So the idea is you'll inspire the listener to go and do something awesome as a result of your answers.
Cool.
You all set?
I am all set.
What's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Do something different every day is my number one go-to activity, especially if we've got into that rut.
I love it. And I'm studying a little bit about the impact of diet on our health, not just weight, but our health overall, and preventing disease with diet and so on. And one of the things that is coming out very clearly on that is varying the diet within kind of the range of foods that are good for you, but varying the diet, also varying the times you eat, and rather than having the same breakfast every day at the same time, have different meals at different times of the day. Maybe have dinner for breakfast one day and swap the times around, or different times. And it's all around our body is designed to be lazy, to conserve energy, and it needs to be challenged to become more stress resistant or stress tolerant, or stress resilient is the word. And part of that is that stress resilience is increased stress resilience is what will ward off disease as well. Yeah. So in a way, that's another innovative way to change.
Yeah, perhaps that is why that works, because I'll quite often say, 20, and it might be it's a 28-day challenge. Do something every day different for 28 days, because it's not enough to only do it for 2 days, because it's, you get the, I'll put my socks on, or put them on a different way around, or whatever. But after 2 or 3 days, you get into the uncovering patterns of unhelpful patterns, or the autopilot you've got onto various things.
Yeah.
And every time I do it, it's hugely enlightening about, how often do I say no to things? Oh, I'm going to say yes a bit more.
Wonderful. All right. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I still think it's going out into nature and writing. So if I am stuck, it's not just, I realise it's not just going out in nature. It's going out into nature, sitting in nature with a pen in hand, and writing. And I don't know whether that's just because that is the quickest way to get in touch with my inner wisdom, and therefore new ideas emerge from that. I kept trying to come up with a better answer to that question, and I kept coming back to, but Alison, the answer's that.
Yeah. Well, there's we talked about walking and with a partner and making notes around the discussion there. And there are apps now where you can walk and talk into the app. And that's, again, that comes back to that idea of, because of the movement, that taps into more of that inner wisdom that you described earlier.
I must try that then, because I normally sit down and write.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the same if I say it out loud, but I will try it, because I'm on holiday for the next couple of weeks. So I will take that as I'll write it down and have a go.
There you go. All right. Do you have a favourite resource you use most often?
Other than the tools that I keep mentioning, this is a bit dog-eared. The Creative Whack Pack by Roger von Erck. And it's just a series of, I like cards, series of cards, because again, it's not logic choosing, you're just choosing, and then you're invited to think about, how does this card relate? So So the one I've just chosen is see the positive. So it would just be inviting you to, and there's a sort of a bit of a quote underneath it. But again, you can go off to all sorts of tangents then, dependent on, oh, am I being a bit too negative at the moment? In what way am I? So if it's a new idea, seeing the positive might be suggesting, why am I discounting that idea? Why am I jumping down? It's, Disney, lots of the NLP Disney technique is, let's not jump in with all the reasons why it won't work before we've come up with all the reasons why it would. So I think what I like about the cards is the fact that it's not logical necessarily, and therefore we're quite often invited to think something different.
And there's a game aspect to it as well, isn't there? And the game aspect kind of gives people permission to kind of not follow the rules of this is how we do things in this business.
Yeah, gorgeous.
All right. What's the best way to keep a client on track? For example, when you're doing that 28-day challenge.
Yeah, it is. And I was only talking about it yesterday with somebody, that we forget the power of just splitting everything down into smaller chunks and keeping on track, keeping an eye on what it is. Because I was talking to somebody and they're going, oh, this isn't happening. Well, where's your plan? Well, I don't have a plan. It's like, so I think it is that. Let's look at what needs to be done. Let's break it into smaller chunks. We've just been doing some bite-sized videos, and the power of having daily check-ins to say, where are we? What problems have we got? Who needs to be doing what? So it's not fundamentally new. It's going back to what we know works that we quite often don't do.
Yeah. Breaking it down into small pieces. That's so powerful. And I have to keep reminding myself of that. And in a way, that's like, there's the forest and it's overwhelming.
Yes,
and I've got to get to the other side. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
I would say it's being themselves. And that requires us not to listen to the stereotypes and not listen to in order to be in business, Alison, you have to not be jolly. In order to be in business, you have to wear a particular type of suit or whatever. So I think my journey has absolutely been about, when I'm at my Alison-y best, that's when when I bring out the best in others, and when we make more innovative ideas and we make more progress. And I think that's the same for everybody, that we've all got a gift to bring, but sometimes we hide it behind the mask of this is how I should be in business. And so I often say we need to bring our humanity into business, but what I really mean is ourselves. If we're really geeky about something, or we've got a real area of expertise, why would we hide it for fear of, that's not what's needed in business?
That's wonderful advice. And it comes back to this idea of, if we all have inner wisdom of some sort, and tapping into that brings that out. If we're kind of trying to be somebody else or trying to behave like somebody else, then that puts a barrier in front of that, right?
Completely. And I think people underestimate the fact that they are able and react to that barrier. So that they don't understand why they're not gelling with somebody. And it's because there's that barrier. That it's not how they're acting per se, it's how they're not acting that's the issue. That somehow it's, I know there's something you're not telling me. I know there's something you're hiding from me. I don't know what that is. Therefore, I'm going to make up a whole load of reasons of what you might be hiding from me. And actually, all you're hiding from me is that part of you. And you might not say anything different about your recommendations may be exactly the same, but because you're hiding something, I don't trust your recommendations. As soon as you say the same recommendations from a place of, this is me, I've got purple extensions in the hair, I laugh and I can get a bit giggly. people go, oh yeah, they'll forgive me my laughter because I'm being me. They don't see it as false. They see it as that's Alison. Sometimes I might have a fit of giggles, and they'll forgive me it because it's me. And therefore people will forgive all sorts of foibles if they know it's us being authentic, and then they'll listen to our advice. It would be my view on it.
Yeah. And again, coming back to what you said earlier about being judgmental about things, and we tend to be very judgmental about ourselves and say, well, that maybe having a giggling fit or whatever it is not acceptable to a certain audience that I want to get in front, and yet they probably don't care. It's probably more important. It's probably more important that they see, yes, this person is sincere and genuine.
Yeah. There's a video blog of me going out into nature, no surprise there, and picking up sticks to demonstrate the sticks we beat ourselves up with. And then putting them down. And what I was surprised, because this is the thing when you go out into nature, it's like, oh, I'm going to embody this saying, I'm going to put the sticks down. And I thought it was just going to be one stick I was picking up and putting it down. But when I got out there, I went, oh no, there's a few sticks, isn't there? And there's big sticks, and there's heavy sticks, and there's long sticks. And so I think I picked up about 5 or 6 sticks and put them down. But since then, what I realized when I embodied that, we pick the sticks up. Nobody else hands us the sticks. We not only do we beat ourselves up with the sticks, it's as if we pick the sticks up in order to beat ourselves up with them. So so it's a great reminder that when we're being negative towards ourselves and beating ourselves up, that's all us. We're doing that picking up of the sticks. Yeah, we're looking for those reasons to have a go at ourselves.
Yeah, and we can choose to put them away, put them back down. We can. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Alison. This has been fabulous. Now, where can people find out more about you and maybe even reach out to say thank you, listen to your podcast, buy the book?
The best way, because there's a few Alison Smiths, so if you start searching Alison Smiths, whether it's .co or whatever, then you might miss me. So the best bit is to look for Landscaping Your Life, because Landscaping Your Life on LinkedIn, Landscaping Your Life on Amazon, Landscaping Your Life on YouTube, then you're at Landscaping Your Life on podcasts, because the podcast is called Landscaping Your Life. The book has got Landscaping Your Life in the title. Then you'll find me. Either hashtag Landscaping Your Life or just the full way, and that'll find me in all the various different places that I pop up.
Excellent. And we'll include links in the show notes to all those places as well, so people can find them. So thanks so much for sharing your time and your wisdom. Actually, I do need to ask one more question. And what action would you like our listener to take out of our conversation today, Alison?
Do something different. Do something different today, and ideally for the next 28 days. But if not, just do something different today.
Excellent. Well, that's pretty simple to execute call to action. So I look forward to hear what people come up with. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights today so generously, Alison. It's been fun to talk about forest and trees and woods and metaphors and sticks, big sticks, little sticks. And I've really enjoyed it and learnt a lot. So all the best for the future, and please do stay in touch.
Thank you. I've had a great time.